Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Sutton. Thank you for joining us. Today I'm joined by Vince Michel. He's our affordable housing coordinator for the city and county. How have you been doing?
I've been doing great.
Yeah,
Glad
I
to be here.
heard you had a little bit of a bout with COVID last
I
week.
did, yeah. I was me and about a million other people. It seems like it's been going around quite a bit lately. So, yeah, 2.5 years I was able to stay away from it, but it was a gift from my wife. So, yeah, I've thanked her for it. So anyway,
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm feeling much better. Thank you.
that's a lovely gift. Um, and yeah, so I'm glad you came in today. I've been wanting to talk to you a little bit. I know you've been here for I'm not sure how many months has it been now.
I started in February the 1st,
Yeah.
and so it's been 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and had a very good opportunity to get to know a lot of folks here, and obviously love Fredericksburg. It's a long drive from my house, but it's very enjoyable. I love coming, and love the opportunity to help out the community in with respect to their affordable housing needs. And there's quite a need here,
Yeah.
as with other communities. So looking forward to doing what I can going forward.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on. You kind of a halfway through update on
Yeah.
everything. I know Ken had talked to you a little bit or listened to you at the city council meeting about the housing inventory. So how
Right.
can you tell us a little bit about the supply coming in and how that's affecting our housing?
Yeah, and without going through a long detail, the first thing I would mention is that the best thing to do is probably archive on YouTube the city council meeting from July the 5th. The development folks at the city provided a very good detailed list of all of the proposed developments, both in single family and multifamily. And so, without having to go through an exhaustive list, I can just generally there has been proposed over 900 units of housing, which is a substantial amount. Usually, historically, there have only been between 50 and 80 single-family homes that are built on an annual basis here in Fredericksburg, and it's been well over a decade since a multifamily property was developed. So, the opportunity to have over 900 units of housing is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a good thing in one sense, but it's not so good in another sense, in that most of this is what I would consider high dollar, high income, luxury multifamily, high dollar single family. So unfortunately, it's not really meeting the challenges that the affordable housing issues are facing here, not really meeting that. So I am a bit concerned. It's good in the sense that obviously the more supply you have,
Yeah.
let them build. Build as much as you can, because if it oversupplies, it's going to put downward pressure on rents and the cost of the housing. And some of these like multifamilies that have been here for 30 or 40 years that are still commanding high dollar, hopefully that will put some pressure on them to reduce their rates. But yeah, I mean that could potentially be right there 10 years worth of needs with respect to housing. We just need to work a lot harder on getting some of that workforce housing built here. And it's very difficult for the developers, because based on their, the cost of land and the cost of development and the hard time of getting the subcontractors and stuff, it's almost impossible for them to build affordable. And it's really, they're having to price on their cost, and that ends up only being affordable for your top 40% of folks that live here. And so really trying to work to assist those individuals in the workforce that are making between 80,000 and below a family income. That's really what needs to be focused on. So yeah, a lot of proposed housing. I can't tell you actually how much of it is actually going to get built. It's a lot's proposed. There's always a lot of stuff that's proposed, but there's been a marked inflection point in housing literally over the last 60 days, with the change in in mortgage rates and lender rates even for the multifamily stuff. So there's certainly some headwinds, and I think a lot of this development that was proposed and was on the drawing board, 2, 3, 4 years now coming, where they're coming in and getting the applications and the approvals from the city. Some of these developments, if not a great number of them, may be put on hold for a while. So I can't really tell you exactly how many of those 900 units are actually going to be built within the next 3 years. I hope a lot, but we'll have to see what the macroeconomic factors are that is going to affect whether these things are built or not.
Yeah, and some of those things that you just talked about with inflation and everything, that'll kind of be what I want to talk to you a little bit more about. And I know I put this as one of my last questions, but I actually want to kind of move it up to more of the beginning. The approval for the consent of the municipal utility district happened recently,
right?
And that seems like one way that could bring some housing in that could be more affordable. Can you tell us a little bit more about the municipal utility districts?
Yes, I was a little bit involved with that, assisting the city in defining the pros and cons of that. Generally, I was in consensus with approving that. I think it does provide some opportunities to build affordably, primarily in the single family. Excuse me. So as far as the progress on that, I'm sure anybody that's driven down
Friendship,
thank you, recently has seen the construction that's going on there and seen the utility work. That's the city tying in the utility infrastructure, primarily for phase 1, which is Lennar, which is one of the top 5 home builders in the country. This will be the first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this Lennar is very, very large single-family developer within the United States. They have closed on the land for phase 1 of their development, which is 100 units of single-family, and that's an R1A zone community. So it'll be small lots. So with the small lots, all of a sudden, and with the opportunities of some of the infrastructure, the less cost on the infrastructure development subject to the MUD, it provides Lennar with an opportunity to come in and build at what would be below what Fredericksburg has been seeing in the last 6 months, 12 months. They have some economies of scale, obviously, and some opportunities. So I would, based on my conversations with the developer here a month or so ago, he's telling me that hopefully by the first of the year, the actual houses will start to go up.
Okay.
So I'm hoping by this time next year, there will be some properties that are going to hit the market. So, and there's also some other opportunities because the some of the development costs as the housing market starts to take a dip down might provide them with some opportunities. So I kind of looked at a kind of a comparable development, and there's a development down in San Marcos that Lennar is in the process of building. It's called Sunset Oaks.
Okay.
And it looks to me like, and it's in a R1A zoned. It is more of a modest development size. A little disappointed in that the cost per square footage of those homes are still in the $220 a square foot. So you're looking at still over $300,000. So I'm really hoping as these phases, there are 4 phases that Lennar is planning on doing. They actually hasn't closed the land on all 4 of them. They've only closed 1. So right now they own the land, are in the process of starting that development. So I am hoping that as their costs go down, they're a tract home, spec home builder. They have a model that they're going to use, and as their costs go down, they will reduce the price of their homes. So I am hoping by this time next year, and as these development costs go down, they'll have an opportunity to start pricing those homes in the $180 to $190 a square foot price range. So that's really what is needed here. Some modest homes, 1,500 square foot, 3 2s in the 290, under 300,000. That, especially with the increase in the interest rates, mortgage rates that have gone up. So I'm hopeful. There's no guarantee. There's no way to control that.
Sure.
But that's their model, and so I anticipate that they are going to follow through with that model here.
Great. And as for some other affordable housing options and ideas, what are some things that you guys have discussed with the council and with city staff? What are some of the other things that y'all are kind of floating around?
Yeah, as I'd mentioned, it's basically impossible for a retail market rate developer with the cost of the land and the development cost to build affordable. And so there needs to be some type of public assistance through public-private partnerships, which is the model that's being employed around this, not reinventing the wheel here. That's a model that's being employed around the country, around Texas, around the local communities as well, where there's partnerships that are being formed between private developers and units of local government, albeit the city, the county, school district, or a combination of those three, where there is some incentives or assistance through the public, such as the provision of either public land or full discounts or abatements in ad valorem property taxes, that for the developer it reduces the upside development cost if the land is cheap or it's leased, and then their ongoing operating expenses on ad valorem, and we're talking multifamily development here, multifamily rental development. So that is the push that I has made to the both the county and the city, but primarily the city. I've had the opportunity to make a presentation to the city county workshop, and then again to the city council back on July 5th. So I've teed it up. I've presented the housing study, which has identified the demand that's there and the need, and then gave them kind of the roadmap for if they decided that was something that they felt like was proper. And there's that kind of, you have to cross that Rubicon. That's something that's new, that local units of government have not historically needed to get involved in private development of housing. That's always something that the private sector has relied on and didn't need to get involved. Well, for economic reasons, that model has basically failed. And so local municipalities, big and small, have come to the realization that, look, if we don't step in and do some type of assistance here, then we're not going to have the ability to have affordable housing built in this community. So, and I understand it, because you're using tax dollars. And so you want to make sure that, well, if I'm giving up tax dollars, I need to get some type of affordability back. And that's part of the negotiation between certain developers, and you going off for requests for proposals for developers to come in. So that's all negotiated, but there has to be that change in understanding that, we've never done this before, never needed to do it. Now we do. Is it right and proper to use public funds or public land out of public funds in order to assist these developers? And so that takes some time, and that's a I understand the potential reluctance there. There's always unintended consequences and always pushback on government funds for private for private entities. So but it has been done, and so that has how I have presented it, and so we'll see where it goes at this point. But very positive. There's certainly a wholesale change in council and the mayor, and so they've got a lot on their plate right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so just take it one step at a time, and we'll see what flows out of that. So, but that's part of my job is to educate and advocate for, and give them the pros and cons and my experience, with the good, bad, and the ugly of doing this, and alternatives, and just however it is. So that's part of my job. And if I need to come back, 20 more times to answer the questions, I'm more than willing to do it, and just so they'll feel comfortable going forward.
Yeah, and you had mentioned municipalities are starting to feel like they need to get involved, and you also mentioned school districts, and that's been interesting for me to look at over the last couple of years. Where proper areas like Fredericksburg and even Austin and bigger places like that, where housing is becoming an issue, and especially for teachers. So they feel like, man, we got to get in this, or else we're not going to have any teachers. So
absolutely, yeah, and that's what we're talking about, where you start to look at as your workforce, and especially your essential workforce, your your educators, your first responders, your civil employees with the county. Those are essential to the functioning of any local community.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to break that down, you start to have that understanding of, well, we need to assume that those are essential. And because they're essential, if you don't have housing for it, then you might start to look at the actual workforce housing as public facilities, because they become essential. Mm-hmm. And that's part of that change in the mindset of saying, okay, well, workforce housing can be perceived as a public facility. And if it is a public facility, then it's right and proper to use public funds, public tax dollars, to invest in that. Because if you don't have that, your essential workers, then you're basically your community is going to suffer and not be able to continue to provide the required resources that those local units of government are need to provide. So.
Yeah. And the next thing I want to talk a little bit about, you had mentioned about economic uncertainties, and inflation has gone up, and is that affecting affordable housing, and what are some ways that y'all are working on to combat that? What are some things that developers are working on?
Well, it's almost impossible, because because these are macroeconomic factors that unfortunately local developers don't really have an opportunity to curtail. Maybe a Lennar, where they do owner financing or providing some incentives, but for the most part, your multifamily developers and your single-family developers, they can't do anything about the increase in mortgage rates. They can't do anything about the fact that the cost of lumber tripled over the last year and a half. They can't do anything in the fact that appliances that they're trying to get to finish these houses, there's a backlog 8 months. So it's just it was just anything that could go wrong went wrong. The cost of dirt skyrocketed. It's taken forever. The subcontractors, your plumbers and everybody, especially in Fredericksburg, they're charging a premium because they're having to drive from San Antonio and Austin. So so you combine all of these increases in the cost to develop on top with interest rates, so it was like a perfect storm. So all of a sudden, the affordability for even the top earners just became, out of everybody's reach. And there was an inflection point within the last 30 to 45 days, especially as those interest rates came up, that all of a sudden this frenzy, this FOMO, fear of missing out on all of these investors and single family homeowners that were scrambling to buy houses and pushing the prices up, that's really flipped on its head. And so here in the last 30 days, I was looking at some surveys. There was right now over 80% of the home buyers right now saying that it's a terrible time to buy a house. So the combination of interest rates that went from the high twos to went over 6.25%. They've come down about a point over the last 30 days, but still twice what they were. A lot of these home builders are having their contracts for these homes canceled, and so all of a sudden this demand that was creating this lack of inventory, we got down to only like a 30-day supply of inventory of new and used houses. Typically a balanced market, supply and demand, is about 6 months. So that is all of a sudden just immediately, and so all of a sudden the supply of housing over the last 30 to 45 days is just really turned and is rocketed up. So we went from 30 days, now within like 60 days we're close to a 6 month supply. That will continue to go up.
Yeah.
So that's what I was saying is that I am hoping, because as that demand goes away, that's when you start seeing people starting to reduce their prices on their houses, things like that. And then as these builders quit building, then all of a sudden your subcontractors aren't going to charge as much, because all of a sudden they don't have the work anymore. So they'll take a job at cost just to keep their employers. The price of lumber, at the peak it was $1,700 per 1,000 board feet. Typically prior to the pandemic it was like $300. So that has dropped. So it went from $1,700 down to $500. So I'm hoping as supply goes up, as the demand crashes, as the cost of this development goes down, that's when you're going to start seeing a substantial reduction in the new home prices and the cost of the multifamily rentals that are being built, so they're not having to charge as much rent. So back in 2008 and in 2010 at the last housing crash, it was similar, but it literally took, in some markets it took almost 5 years from the peak of the housing, the price of the housing to the bottom. And so I am hoping, especially in Fredericksburg, and I don't wish this, again, I don't want to wish the value of anybody's houses going down, but it's out of control. We went way beyond what the standard deviation, what was normal over the last 5 to 10 years, and just price of housing went up 30%. And that's unsustainable, and it's so far out of the range that historically it's gonna force itself to go back down. So I'm anticipating a fairly substantial reduction in the home prices here within the next couple 3 years. But that's a technical assessment, just like the stock market. You look historical trends and and what's happened in the past, and try to extrapolate that to the future, but there's no guarantee.
Right.
So that's my best guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking with me.
Sure, my pleasure.
Giving us a little bit of information and data. I know it's a little bit scary right now with the way houses are, the costs, but it does seem like y'all are working on it, and there's a lot being done to combat it. So thank you so much for all you do and for coming in.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Again, Sam Sutton, joined by Vince Michel. Thank you so much.